go back and interact with people you talked in the past, and I'm never say no to a good talk. Before I talked to this young man, he gave me a bit about himself, but we're going to round two. Ladies and gentlemen, today I speak again to not Kneale Burris, but today I'm sitting down and talking with Arthur Taylor the Fourth, and we're about to get real right now. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, dude. It's a decent day. Off screen, I had a little bit of a cough, but it's disappeared. So now I just sound like one of those people who is like, "Oh, I'm so sick, but I'm not actually sick."
Look, man, with the way the world's been going the last couple of months, we want to hear you being good right now.
I just want to talk about that for a second. I'm not going to get into a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to talk a ton about the pandemic, but I want to confirm that even if the world is going to complete bonkers, crazy town crap, I can now confirm that Ronald Smith will still be the most polite person you will ever meet. I have lived through it. I will live through it. And I have experienced the kindness. And here we are.
God willing, I can only ask for that.
You are too chill for this world, my friend. Too chill for this world.
Oh, man, you know me. I try my best. I try. But, Arthur, as we go with this talk, I know that you really wanted to open yourself more up to me and to the public. So why not? Let's go into that, man. Let's go find more about you.
And I am open as they come.
And your likes, your interests. So I know that you are a movie fan. Mm-hmm. And I know that you love some things about it. But give me more detail about Arthur's personal feelings and interest about it.
You know, I gotta admit, it is a little weird to be called Arthur. You can keep doing it, but it is a little weird because no one ever does it. So because of that, it's just like, whoa. I'm talking about this person I've never been, but I've always been. Arthur and Kneale's similarities are very similar because they are the same person. We are one. We are Venom. It's not a bad movie, but it's a great character. I think when it comes to stuff like movies, like whenever you think about movies, you mostly just think about moments. Like when I say Avengers Endgame, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The big battle at the end.
Oh, yeah. Just everybody getting together. And you don't think about some of the like different scenes, but they're just as good. You just think about that really big scene and everybody, all these characters you've been following for years coming together to save the world, the sacrifice made by the one that started it all. And you feel that as if these are real people. Like I see stuff on friggin' Instagram and Facebook almost every day talking about like Tony's sacrifice, stuff like calling back to the original Avengers, like when you have to make the hard call, are you going to lay down your life for the team? And then Tony did that. He did what Cap said he wouldn't do. And it's just so rewarding. And I think in Avengers specifically, they have told this magnificent story that is just carrying people's interest straight through to the next movie and will continue for the next couple of phases. And I don't think we've had something like this for a while, where we have this story that so many people are resonating with. Like, I think the last example was the original trilogy Star Wars, where everybody was just freaking out and everybody really had a lot of opinions and love for this, and they loved the world building. And then the prequels came out and that sail died. that ship sank and got shot by a freaking submarine and blew up, and now there are little pieces of it on the floor. They still try to unearth it, but, you know, not a lot of people like Rise of Skywalker, so.
Speaking of Rise of Skywalker, and everything that you just said about Endgame, about the MCU, it's the same thing you can say about the new Star Wars trilogy, on people connecting with characters, you know, the big build up towards it, but it had a different effect. You know, in the end, when it was all said and done with that saga for Star Wars, a lot of people were still angry and upset. So for you then, because how much you really care about storytelling, what can you see is the big difference between how Endgame handled it and how The Last Jedi handled it? The Last Skywalker, Last Skywalker.
So, I think this might be, I don't know if this is an opinion that is necessarily uncommon. I think it comes down to two things. Number one, the MCU is not afraid to make big choices. And a lot of times it feels like the sequel trilogy was. Like, look at everything they did with Finn's character and look how it was pretty much worth nothing. Look at how Poe is going through this arc through all the movies and how it doesn't really have a climax either. And Rey's climax wasn't really satisfying either. The only one that had a really, in my mind, complete story beginning to end was Kylo Ren. And I stick to the opinion that Kylo's story is one of the most interesting in Star Wars, even with Rise of Skywalker, because it just adds another depth to him of, oh no, he really cared about this person. And even though he did kill his father, he's the one person who could talk him out of this. And that scene where it's like, Dad, you know, and then Han goes, I know. It just gets me every time. Like, I remember the hell out of that scene, and I love it. And with the MCU, there's this interconnectivity that just did not happen with freaking the freaking sequel trilogy. Like, I think that's its biggest problem, that they don't feel like one story. And with the MCU, they are literally separate stories sometimes, but it all feels like one story. And like, it feels like a basic error was made and never corrected.
That's true.
I mean, in terms of storytelling, like, I remember reading somewhere that when not George Lucas, what am I thinking? When J.J. Abrams was doing his new script for Rise of Skywalker, he was like, hey, we're going to keep a lot of the stuff from my original script. And in my head, I'm like, no, you can't do that. You wrote that before Last Jedi. That's not going to fit. And it didn't really fit, even though I'm of the opinion Rise of Skywalker is better than Last Jedi.
Some people would disagree with that.
A lot of people, I think you would disagree with that.
I'm not a Star Wars fan, so all of them are kind of the same to me.
You like Rogue One, and we bonded over that.
I did.
We are the Rogue One boys in the Reactaholic circles.
They got to be real. Come on.
But when it comes to something like storytelling, I feel like you really, like, I play a lot of D&D, which for those of you who don't know, it's essentially just, and this is the barest way to describe it, there's a lot of technical to it, but this is the barest way to describe it. One person tells a story, and everybody else listening to the story are actually characters in that story. And we go through the whole story. They can make choices and change the outcome, and it's a whole game, and it's really fun. And I feel like adapting to what makes the characters their characters and telling this really interesting story that goes in directions we didn't necessarily expect it to go is key to keeping people's interest. And with Last Jedi, it did that, but it also, I think when it comes to expectations, you have to know when to subvert them, and sometimes you just have to live up to them. Like, if you subvert people's expectations, whatever you're subverting them with, has to be very pure. And it's hard to describe. It's this balance of, well, if you're going to do this completely different thing, like kill Snoke, even though we built him up as this big bad guy, you have to then really put the work in to make Kylo look evil. Like, you have to convince us instantly that this was the best story we could have been told. And I feel like there was a lot of doubt with that, and everybody felt the missed opportunity. Like, with something like Game of Thrones, by the way, I'm about to spoil a little bit of Game of Thrones. Is that okay, Ron?
Oh, please. Come on now. It's been out for mad long. Go ahead.
I know it's been out for a very long time, but
go ahead, rip it off.
So Daenerys goes evil, and I actually really liked that twist at first because, spoiler alert, I've hated Daenerys from the beginning. But it's just not handled well. Like, it's just, she's won the battle and everybody is surrendering, and then she gets angry and torches the whole place. Like, those are your subjects. I don't understand why you're doing this. You've already won, lady. And it's supposed to be like, look how shocking this is. She's taking back her homeland and avenging her people. No, she's not. She's killing innocents and families, and we see that head on, and there's not a lot of reason for it. And in the end, that could have been heartbreaking. That could have been beautiful. That could have been a tragic but fulfilling ending to her character, and yet it just felt like bad writing. And it's this balance that we have to find, and I unfortunately think that Star Wars is struggling to find it. I think Game of Thrones really fucking dropped the ball. Like, they kept trying to subvert, like, oh, you thought the White Walkers were going to become like the main enemies? No, we're going to kill them in one episode in the final season. Okay, but you've been building up to them since the first episode, and saying winter is coming directly refers to them. Yeah, but we subverted your expectations. This is the big twist. That's not cool, though. Oh, and then guess what? Real big bad. It's going to be Daenerys, just for one episode until she dies too. But you didn't really build up to this. There wasn't a lot of support for this. I understand that Dany was feeling alone, but genocide is not the next step for loneliness.
Shake my head.
Yeah, it's just, there are two ways to tell a story and make it good. You can tell a story well and really captivate somebody and get them in the whole time, or you can tell a story interestingly and have somebody who maybe your plot isn't the best, and maybe you don't have a ton of story or a ton of character development, but if you can keep astounding them and showing them cool stuff and making them happy throughout, that's okay. Like, I think Thor Ragnarok is a good example of this, where even though, like, what's the plot of Thor Ragnarok? Hela comes back because Thor's dad dies. They get trapped on a planet. They get off the planet, and then they fight her. That's the whole plot. But Thor Ragnarok is this incredible journey that is so much fun. And God, seeing Thor fight the Hulk, oh my God. I mean,
that was a lot of fun to watch.
Anytime we talk about friggin' Marvel, there's a lot to nerd out about. And that's the thing. Earlier I was speaking about, when you think about movies, you think about these like one scenes. But since there are so many Marvel movies, and since there's so much incredible stuff in them, I'm constantly like, when it's like, hey, what's the best Marvel moment? Oh, I have no idea. Could it be that scene in Endgame? Could it maybe be that scene when the Guardians are holding each other to prevent them from dying? They literally are using each other to survive. Or scenes from Civil War where Tony is just trying to avenge his mother and he feels betrayed by his friend. There's so much good. And then when you look at like friggin' Star Wars, it's like there was so much potential. And with Game of Thrones, it was basically gift wrapped for them, and they were like, no, this is what we're going to do. And I don't know. I feel like we have really good stories out there, and the best way to tell them is to just sort of give the fans what they want, but also give them what they didn't know they wanted. But you got to put in the effort there and make sure that that's worth it. Like when they open up that present, there better be a pony.
But speaking of the fans, though, because, you know, with storytelling, like you said, sometimes they give as the writers and directors, screenplay writers, they have to follow their story. You know what I mean? How the MCU did, even if it was, you know, some things were just a little roller coaster until they got to the final destination. The destination was always to get to Thanos, the battle to lead up to Thanos. What a lot of people have problems with the Star Wars trilogy was that they felt that the build from the beginning to the end was a lot of mismatch because they had different directors. The first director left, they got a new director, he left, and they brought back the original director. And so that's the thing with storytelling, you know. And when you feel that you watch the next film and you're watching it and they completely just wash it away, because also too, as the fans, they complain, they're mad, and they say this is bad, you should have done this, done that, done this, done that. And when you're building up to that final movie, it's who are you trying to please? Are you trying to please the fans, or are you saying we're following the story? Because that's kind of what The Last Skywalker kind of was. You know, they're trying to fight the battle of pleasing people, and that really made it a really big hiccup.
I completely agree. And I actually so I was having a conversation the other day, and I can't remember who this was with, and I don't want to throw out names because knowing me, I'm going to get it wrong. But I was just talking with somebody who was older than me, and they were telling me about how when Empire Strikes Back first came out, people didn't actually love it. There were people furious because people wanted Leia to get with Luke. People didn't believe that Darth Vader was actually Luke's father. And there were people who were really upset because Empire Strikes Back did a lot of new things and these big choices. And honestly, I can see it. I can see people being upset about that because, yeah, it would be weird if you had this character who was really in the shadows, didn't speak much, and then just randomly, I'm your father, when you already in your head had accepted this other canon. And it would be a bit of a subversion, sort of, to go back to that. But it's also an interesting subversion. And I think now that time has passed and everybody has accepted, yes, this is like the best Star Wars movie, it really paid off that they stuck to their guns on that. Like when Return of the Jedi came out, it wasn't like, no, actually, I'm not your father. My name is Jim. Hey. It wasn't a situation of, well, the fans didn't like this, we need to go back. It was a situation of, the fans didn't like this, but this is the story. We have to move forward.
Now imagine if social media was as strong as it is right now, back when those movies came out. Imagine if people had said there was backlash for it. Imagine what they would have done. Would they have stayed with their plan, or would have they just been blocked by the gun and be like, you know what, let's switch some things up. People didn't really like this part.
That's the one of the issues with our modern day. Like we can communicate with people throughout. Like I love the interconnectivity that we as people have now. But at the same time, like opinions in terms of film creators are scary, because once you start hearing other people's opinions, you start thinking about other people's opinions and whether or not they're right. You're challenging your own opinions. And I feel like back in the day when it was like we had specific people who review these, obviously the public has a voice, but it was more or less just I guess it was less direct. Like the public, the viewing audience said, yes, this is good, or yes, this is bad. And that was kind of the end of it. Like you didn't have a lot of people just going, here's my full opinions on everything. And you would have people who did reviews, and that would sort of be the end of it. Now, everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice that can be heard. And if you yell loud enough and you get enough people, they're going to hear you, they're going to see you, and that's going to affect them, especially when it's a situation of, well, there are people behind this who are just trying to make money. So if they see you saying stuff like, oh, well, I didn't like this, that's a potential loss of money. So they then feel the need to change for you. And I'm not necessarily against changing Rey into like having a connection to other characters. I wouldn't even be mad if they did that with, let's say, Poe or even Finn. I wouldn't be mad if that happened. But at the same time, it just feels like if your plan wasn't to do that, don't do that. And now that like Rian Johnson has made the story where it's pretty clear you're going in a different direction, don't circle back. Like you got to go forward. You can't go backward. That's not good storytelling. And I don't know. I like Rise of Skywalker, but I just wish there would have been more forward and less back, especially because I'm a real character guy. Like I really like creating characters and speaking about the creation of characters and stuff like that. So when I see these characters I like I've always thought Rey was kind of not Mary Sue-ish, but just kind of bland. I thought she was a lot better in Rise of Skywalker. And as I said before, I think Kylo 100% had a very good story throughout all the movies. I care about these characters, and I want their story to have a climactic end. And in the end, it just felt like, well, we're going to learn things about them that didn't matter. Like, the whole story of Rise of Skywalker is Rey's heritage doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that she's a Palpatine. She can still be a good person. Then my question to that is, if it really doesn't matter that she's a Palpatine, why did we has the audience need to know it? Like, it gets to me a little bit. But, yeah, what you gotta do?
Is that why you enjoy, like, D&D and role-playing? You know, because how you enjoyed the, like you said, tell the story. Is that why?
I love telling stories, and I love being part of stories. I think that stories are, if I have to be blunt here, I think stories are the most human invention ever created. Like, they can be pure, they can be dark, they can be interesting. They are probably the most creative thing we have. Because, of course, when you think about it, stories as an invention? That sounds dumb, but they are. There was a day when we just didn't tell fictional tales, or non-fictional tales for that matter. And then one day we started doing it. It probably started as like, hey, don't do that. Like, you know, sort of like the stuff we had for kids where it was like, hey, don't eat those berries. Here's a story about someone who ate those berries and then, you know, died.
Life lessons.
Yeah, and then that slowly became in-game. And now we're here. But I think in terms of like character and storytelling, it's so grand and such this big thing for me that when I see these people who I can obviously call my better, like J.J. Abrams and Disney, they are obviously better storytellers than I am, just do these things where I'm like, why would you do this? It's frustrating because, you know, if you could tell a better story, or if you know that the story should be going in a certain direction, and it doesn't, well, it's another subversion of your expectations. But again, not all expectations should be subverted. I really think they should have just played it out and gone with the whole Rey is nobody. Let's see what we can do with this. And instead of like going, oh, Rey isn't actually nobody, she's Palpatine's granddaughter. Say instead, Rey, it was nobody, but now she's going to become somebody. And then make the whole Rise of Skywalker thing make sense. Like, if you really break it down, Leia was her master, but Leia's last name was Organa even after she married Solo, and she knew Luke for like a day. So her picking Skywalker as her last name was weird. She really should have picked Solo, especially given her connection to Ben. I feel like that made more sense to her character.
And that's what a lot of people, again, were upset about. You know what I mean? Like exactly what you just said, you know, and for some, it killed their joy of the whole Star Wars. And so now, like, that's why a lot of people are happy that it's getting a break. So that's what sometimes bad storytelling can do. It can make fans of said genre be completely turned off, and they may not want to come back. Do you fully believe that stuff like that can really kill a fan base?
I have this to say about fan bases, because we obviously live in a world post Rick and Morty where we have seen, I know it's still going on, but I mean post the Rick and Morty fan base, where we have seen just how bad fan bases can get. And I think that what it is when you have these people who love something like Star Wars, but really hate the stuff coming out for it. I feel like obviously there's a bit of, oh, stop being so stuck up, but there's also like there's a sad side to it, because they love this thing. Like with Ghostbusters, everybody was freaking out because they loved the original Ghostbusters, and the new one was so different and so drastically changed, and you know, everybody thought it was going to be terrible. And I have no opinion on it, really. It was kind of bland for me. I didn't really care about it, but people felt attacked by these movies because they loved what came before, and now these new ones feel like not as good and an insult. And I think that's not the way to take it. Like, my advice when it comes to fan bases is this: you don't have to love everything. I love the entire MCU except for Captain Marvel. I think it's a bad movie. I think it's terrible, but I still love the MCU, and I even like the Star Wars prequels, and I know there are some bad Star Wars movies, and I'm never going to like some of them. Like, I don't like the second of the prequels. I think it's called Attack of the Clones.
A lot of people don't like them.
But I do like Clone Wars, the animated series. I love the world. I love the story. I don't have to love every part of it. And I think that's where fan bases are struggling. Like, you know, people say, these characters saved this movie. Like, this whole thing would have been terrible if it wasn't for Tony Stark. Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark makes Iron Man 2 enjoyable. I think we need to have more things like that, like where it's like, Rise of Skywalker, you know, it wasn't that great, but that scene with Han was wonderful, and Kylo's story really did come to an interesting head. Just, I think, plain and simple, fans, we got to look on the bright side and take what we get. We gotta accept what we have, and you can't just go, it's not canon, make it uncanon. Stop saying that. It's a story.
But then why do you care so much? Like, why do you care so much about the way these stories are for yourself as a fan?
Well, I think this is where we would diverge a little bit away from Marvel and stuff, because like As I was saying earlier with the stories, I think they connect people. Like, I am the biggest nerd you will meet. I mean, they're obviously bigger, but...
Oh, come on. That's everywhere.
Yeah, but remember back in the day, like, I literally got beat up for watching Star Wars before.
People got made fun of being comic book fans and talking about everything that has to do with superhero stuff. Nowadays, everyone is a fan.
And God said that the meek shall
inherit the
earth. And here we are, jerks. But yeah, I feel like with stories, they're sort of how we get to know each other. Like, I put on like all my bios for social media and stuff. Hey, here's the crap I like. Because then if you also like this crap, we have something to talk about. And it's just, I feel like you can be in any situation now and just say, hey, so how'd you feel about this Marvel movie? And you have a conversation topic at least for 5 minutes. I feel like we, as people, if we can tell good stories, then they sort of do the heavy lifting for us.
Do you take it as escapism?
I do think it's a form of escapism, but I would more heavily lean on just self-expression more than anything. Like, when you tell a story, it could be, this is the story I want to see, and I want to escape from who I am and tell the story. Or you could go, this is the story I want to tell based on the person I am. And then you could do this. Like, with character creation, like, that's really what it is. Somebody had to look at these characters and make them interesting. Like, since I play D&D, what I do is I go, okay, what would be an interesting character to play? I don't want to play as myself. Because if I play it as myself, it would be boring. Like, it would just be like, Kneale, what would you like to do? Sit on the couch and watch Gravity Falls. Is that it? Yeah.
I mean, Gravity Falls is a great show.
Gravity Falls is a great show. So, what it is you get these stories, and I like to play characters that are different from me, but have a piece in me, of me in them. Like, for example, I'm going to be playing this character coming up in a Monster Hearts show. Monster Hearts is basically a teenage drama D&D where you're secretly a monster. So imagine Riverdale, but Archie's a werewolf.
Oh, gosh.
And it's interesting, and it's really fun, and I'm playing a character which I have named Drew Lemons, because I wanted his last name to be Lemons, and I refused to cooperate on that. And he is essentially just a real big jerk, because a lot of bad stuff happened in his past. And he just is very standoffish and does not like talking to people. On first glance, someone could be like, hey, Kneale, what character do you want to play? And I would be like, oh, just a humongous asshole. Just a big old jerk. But then when you dig deeper, because this is storytelling, you have to ask yourself the question, why is he a jerk? And my answer was, well, he's built these walls. He does care about people, but he doesn't want to express that anymore. So because of that, he acts like a jerk, but if he saw somebody in danger, the first thing he'd do is run up and try to help. And then he'd swear up a storm that they were stupid enough to get in danger. I like to have interesting characters that make sense, but are convoluted. Like, if I think an example of this, and this is going to be a weird example, is Buford from Phineas and Ferb. Because the whole thing is like Buford is this bully for the first couple of episodes, and then he really just isn't. He's
Yeah.
just kind of like a direct and blunt character who does pick on Baljeet, but he loves Baljeet, so they're best friends. Like, who honestly thinks that Buford hates Baljeet? He doesn't. He just picks on him because that's how he expresses himself. And that's an interesting dynamic. Look at Bulk and Skull, these guys who were these bullies to the Power Rangers, and they treated them like garbage. But when In Space comes around, who is leading the normal people in a charge against the monsters? It's Bulk and it's Skull. They had an arc and they became these heroes. It's really interesting to see these characters that are cliches or are not super important, or maybe even were just passing the wind, and then see them come up and have this interesting take that makes them so cool. Like, I think the best example of a character becoming so much deeper is Hodor from Game of Thrones, who, so if you don't know about Hodor, he's this character that's been in it since the first season, and his whole thing is he says the word Hodor. That's his whole thing. He can't speak. He's a bigger character. He's used to carry around one of the characters that can't. His name is Hodor. He just says Hodor. We get to this episode later in the show's life, far along, by the way. And we get to a scene where Bran has to go back in time, and he sees a younger Hodor, and he's just a normal dude. Then the White Walkers start attacking, and Bran needs Hodor to, like, stop them from getting through this door. He's still back in time, so what he does is mind control Hodor in the past to hold the door. And it's just people screaming, "Hold the door!" And that's how he became Hodor. When he got mind controlled, it screwed up his head and he saw his death. And still, even though he knew how he was going to die and he knew it was going to be with this kid, he still went with him and he still took care of them. And in that one episode, we take this character who literally at one point just walked over naked because he was dumb and made him so deep and so interesting with just one twist. It's storytelling like that needs to be celebrated and is the reason why so many people hate Game of Thrones right now, because we had this wonderful cleverness. And then we had, I'm going to do genocide now because of bells. I don't like bells.
So, but besides the MCU and Game of Thrones and Star Wars, through everything you've been saying about how important storytelling is, can you tell me, or really, has any director inspired you, or any other film besides those three inspired you to be so invested in it?
Oh, yes. And it goes beyond films. Like, as earlier mentioned, D&D, it's just a story. There's no, like, there can be visuals of figures and stuff, and there's usually art. But the game itself, the story itself, takes place in your mind. It's really a lot of talking. And honestly, it's very reminiscent of a campfire story. Where it's just someone is telling you a story. You just happen to be a character in the story. And I think that's cooler than a campfire story. But one thing that is really inspired me in terms of character creation, I've got two big ones I want to talk about. One of them is just a really good example of creativity used to its fullest, and the other is just, in my opinion, one of the perfect examples of taking nothing and making it iconic. And we're going to start with that second one first. And I am, of course, bringing up the Muppets.
I wasn't even thinking about that.
Well, here's the thing. The Muppets, as much as it pains me to say it, but this is true, so I have to. Kermit is a sock. Kermit is a sock puppet.
You're kidding.
Yeah. But here's the thing, and the reason, like, it is actually, like, sort of a thing to say. Like, when you call Kermit a sock, it almost feels like you're insulting the man. And the whole thing is, he's not a man. He's a puppet. He's a sock puppet. But you don't think of him like that. Because anytime you see Kermit, he shows more personality that any person you see on the street is going to show. Like, if you see a person walking down the street, they might wave to you, they might say hi, but 10 times out of 20, they're just going to walk by you. And I was going to say like 9 times out of 10, but instead I said 10 out of 20 because I'm bad at math. Anyways, we see Kermit as a person, and we are invested in his stories. We love laughing at him. We love going with him. And I really think that the Muppet movie is legitimately like this piece of art we need to hang up in a museum. And I mean that unironically. Like, it is such a good movie about this frog. This person just lived his life doing nothing, getting up and deciding, you know what? I want to make people happy. And he goes and he finds other people who want to make people happy and have fun in show business. He goes on this journey and he gains a family out of it. And he has to fight for his dream. There are people who stand in the way of it. And he literally says, I'm not going to let a bully control me. When we can put aside the fact that, the Muppets are like puppets and it looks like Sesame Street. It's so childish. Yeah, so is everything. Everything is childish. Spoiler alert, you used to be a child. We all used to be children.
Some people still don't think that, though.
There's nothing wrong with being childish. Because if you appeal to children and adults, you get everybody. So who cares? Except for teenagers. But those aren't human. But when you're looking this story of just doing what you want to do and making an effort to do it, I resonate with that so much because I have dreams. We all have dreams. And along the way of achieving your dream, you will find people who share that dream. I want to do YouTube and stuff and become famous. My whole dream is to like make people happy by being famous, sort of like the Muppets, and entertain people and make them laugh. And I have found people who share that dream. We have all come together because we care about that idea of just doing what we like. And in the end, the story of the Muppets is what you want to do is the right thing to do. You're going to have to go through a bunch of hell to do it. But when you get there, you will not be alone. And I think that's beautiful. And that's why the Muppet movie is one of my absolute favorites. Like, I refuse to view it as childish.
No, I guess I can see why it connect with you so much.
Oh yeah, like I feel like one way or another, we are all Kermit and Fozzie, just trying to move right along and get where we want to be.
That's like life in general. I fully agree with that.
And Jim Henson knew that start, and he told that story perfectly. And then afterwards, you look at the other Muppet movies, and they're silly, and they're comedy. And you realize the first movie was about getting to the point where they could just make people happy and laugh. And all the other movies are them making people happy and laugh. Except for, like, the newer Muppet movie before Muppets Most Wanted, which I think is a good movie, but dang, that one has some sad scenes in it, especially as a fan of the Muppets. that song, Pictures in My God, I resonate with that. When Kermit is just walking down this hall and seeing pictures of his past and his dream he achieved that may have passed away at this point and may have moved on with his life. And they start talking to him and he sees his friends in his own head. And that's the only way that he's seen them in years. Tell him, hey, please, we can do this again. We did it once. We can do it again. It's not going to be easy. It wasn't easy the first time, but we did it the first time. We can do it again. And then they do it again. And then what's the sequel? Another movie trying to make you laugh.
But going on, man. What was the second one that you wanted to bring up?
So this would be when I realized, oh crap, storytelling. And this is the example I was giving where it's like, this ain't a movie. But it was kind of a movie. So I'm going to count it. I don't know. Maybe it's a movie. You can make the argument. A young Kneale Burris, very young, probably around, I want to say 6. But I remember this day so vividly. We were in a mire and I was walking out. And for whatever the reason, the bargain bin full of DVDs at the very front. They don't usually do that. Usually they're in the back with the DVDs because that's where you sell DVDs. Although it's actually genius to put that at the front because as you're walking out, oh, look, you can own frickin' Harry Potter for $2. Do that. But we're walking out. I'm about to leave. And I see it because the only reason I was able to see it because for whatever the reason, the case itself was white. It was or purple. It was just a different color than what it usually is. You know, it wasn't black. I see it, I walk up, I grab it, and there it is for $5. Kathy Rigby's Peter Pan, the Broadway show. And I was a big Peter Pan nerd. Peter Pan was my first, like, Spider-Man and Peter Pan were my 2 first big nerd loves.
Wow.
So I see this and I'm like, oh, it's Peter Pan with real people. And my mom is like, oh, it's on stage. And I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, can we just get it? It looks really cool. Look at the scene where they're sword fighting. And it was like $5. So I was able to badger my mother or my grandmother, whoever was there, into getting it for me. I take that thing home. Worst mistake they ever made, because you know how there are kids who will just watch Frozen on loop?
Oh, of
they
course.
Got nothing on Kneale Burris when he got that DVD. I would watch that thing every day, once a day, at very high volumes. And the reason I think I got into this so much is it wasn't the songs at first. Because a young Kneale was like, the songs are getting in the way. But it slowly became the songs, and I know all the songs still today just because of how much I watched it as a kid. It was seeing this character that I liked used perfectly. And by the way, I want it to be known, Peter Pan is a boy. Kathy Rigby is a woman.
Right.
That did not affect my experience at all. I didn't even realize it until like my 3rd viewing. And when I did, I was like, well, she's perfect, so who cares?
You were just lost in the worlds. You weren't even paying attention to that.
I cared much more about the fact that she is literally flying and doing flips and it looks real. I spent, I don't know how many hours just looking for the cord that was holding her up. And one day I found it, but I could only find it in certain scenes. And when she flew, with her flips and her gymnastic skills, and with the songs being sung, it was real to me. This person was flying. This story was real. As far as and obviously I knew it wasn't actually real.
Of course.
But I could take it seriously, and I could treat it as real as any other thing. Like, if someone's like, oh, here's some history, and it happened to be an interesting story, I would be like, oh, Paul Revere, that's a cool guy. Here, I was like, Peter Pan, coolest person in the world. And you just see these beautiful sets and these beautiful songs. And Kathy Rigby perfectly bringing this character justice, as she is this kid who just wants to be a kid. And in the end, the story, at least for her version of Kathy Rigby, her version of Kathy Rigby, her version of Peter Pan, the story was simply about a boy who didn't want things to change.
We can all relate to that.
But change happens. And a lot of Peter Pan stories home on that. But I don't think one did it nearly as perfect as this, where Peter is just full out, just wanting to be reckless and have fun and just live his life. And when you really dig into his mind, you realize he's not happy. He's not happy. He's happy when he got Wendy there. He's happy when he found his friends. He's happy when he changed things, but he's so afraid to make the big change. In the end, there's a very emotional way to view this. And even though, like, the ending is, like, Peter stays in Neverland, but he keeps coming back to the real world. The ending is a compromise. Peter doesn't want to change who he is, so he never does. But the world changes. So Peter accepts that, and when the world changes, he brings that in. He goes and sees Wendy when she's an adult. He brings Jane to Neverland. He accepts that even though he's not going to change who he is, he can't control the rest of the world. A 6-year-old is learning this.
It's a lot. And right there, that story that's presenting to you, and you are bringing that into yourself, and in your head, you're taking all that in. And look at you. You're getting lost in it. And you're learning these really lessons for yourself. And
literally, when I was speaking, I was thinking of all the imagery and I was getting into it. Because it's a damn good story.
Just you throw into it, I'm like, man, I forgot how deep Peter Pan can be. Really, gosh darn it.
Anything can be deep if you give it the potential to be. Even a sock puppet that looks like a frog.
That's the truth. That's true. But
true.
Just going back though, because you brought up something that I just really wanted to just dwell a little bit about, of how you said why you do some of these things, why you with D&D, why you care so much about the storytelling, about following the story, and because you say, the big thing too you brought up with also saying why you would pursue a career in YouTube. You want to entertain. You want to entertain people. So for Arthur Taylor IV.
Arthur Kneale Taylor.
Don't forget about that, guys, please. Why do you want to do this so bad? Like, a lot of people, wouldn't even care about putting a smile on people's faces, but why does that reflect on you so much?
Well, I think it boils down to human instinct, I guess, where there was at one point a human instinct to take care of yourself, and you have to survive. That's sort of the whole thing. You have to live to see the next day. And I think as humans, we've sort of reached the point where we know we're going to live to see the next day. So I think we're asking the question, what's the next day going to have in it? And I think it all boils down to, do we want to be smiling tomorrow, or do we want to be just generally boring tomorrow? I mean, like, neutrally content. Because there are days where I am not happy, I'm not sad, I'm not angry, but I am content with being alive. Like, I am just like, I have no emotions, and I'm okay. But to live every day just for yourself or for nobody, to me, isn't necessarily selfish or even wrong, but just not what I want. I like the idea of being on stage and hearing people laugh after I said something, hearing applause to something you do. It's sort of a give and take in that, where it's, I want to know that I made your day better, because that makes my day better. And if I'm getting paid for it, I guess I wouldn't mind that too.
Nothing wrong with that.
The main motivation behind, like, if I wanted to be paid, like, McDonald's can do that. Anyway, you can get a job anywhere, but would you be happy?
That's the big question.
And I think it all comes down to, in the end, for me, what makes me happy, making people happy. Because if other people are laughing and smiling, they're not hurting. Like, I have had days where I have, and I guess this would go back to the other interview a little bit, bad days where I'm sad, I'm hurting, and I really didn't have people to turn to. So I would just watch stuff. And that's when I got to laugh. And that's when I got to smile. It wasn't necessarily at school, and it wasn't necessarily at home. It was here, on YouTube or on Netflix, or just in these stories and in these tales and in this realm of entertainment that I got to be happy. And because of that, I feel like it goes back. I don't know who said it. I don't know how it became so famous. But in the end, after I'm saying all this, I guess it's true. Dude, laughter's just the best medicine. Like, laughter is the one thing that can pull you out of your darkest times. I have bad days. I message people, and I have friends who say, "Oh, that's terrible. I'm here for you." And I have friends who say, "Oh, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do whatever you need." But I have one friend who says, "Oh, well, that sucks," and then makes me laugh and makes jokes about what's going on. And every time, that's the one guy who cheers me up. Because knowing that somebody is going to be there is comforting and completely wonderful. And knowing that people want to help is very good. But having somebody literally take away your pain and your suffering and your fear just for a second so you can giggle, that is a magic I cannot describe. And I am blessed enough to be kind of funny and to have people who like my stuff. Go ahead.
Do you feel though at times of any doubt for yourself, self-doubt of if this said dream for you does not happen?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I think I've gotten to the point where I have fully accepted it's more likely that it won't happen than that it will. But at the same time, as I spoke earlier, and I'm going to attempt to tie everything together, guys, we got to make the best of it. We got to take the good parts. We got to take the parts we do have. I mentioned it earlier. I have found people who care about the things I care about and want to do what I want to do. So even if I can't do it on a broad scale, I want to do it. I want to get up there and I want to make jokes, and maybe I'll make a fool of myself, and maybe I'll look stupid. But in my perception, I'm going to do that either way. I look stupid walking outside in my pajamas to grab mail. I might as well make somebody laugh while doing it. It goes back to Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. If you can do something, you have a moral obligation to do those things. Responsibility. And I think if I can make somebody laugh and I can help somebody, I have a moral obligation to help someone. And if I can just tell some dumb joke or swear or find this little connecting variable that when pointed out to your perception is humorous, I should do that, because no one likes to hurt. And no one likes to hurt people. No one likes to get hurt, and no one likes to be hurt. We just do it because, well, hurt is hurt, and it's poisonous. It's this situation of, why don't you make people happy if you can? And I can, so I do it, because Spider-Man has taught me through his story that taking the gifts you have and using them are essential. The Muppets have shown me that if you do try, it's going to be hard, but if you do try, you create a chance that you can get your way in this. And even if you don't, you still help someone along the way. If Kermit would have stopped right at the end, where he's in the bus with the Electric Mayhem, if he would have just turned around and gone back to the swamp, he still would have had a family. So even if he would have given up right there and decided, I can't achieve my dream, in a way he already did. Because he already made people happy.
And especially at times like this, the world needs laughter. You know, sometimes when life gets a little hard, especially with, you know, what we're dealing with right now, I guarantee you that 20 seconds or just a full-on hour of just listening to you or any other person on the internet, just to laugh, just to get a chuckle, can ease a lot of pain just for that moment.
Oh, I fully agree. That's why there's these things happening that are like watch parties and people streaming to YouTube just watching movies, and they're like, we don't care if this gets taken down, we just want to like cheer people up a little bit. I think the last thing to say here, just sort of to end it all off, is you know, we all really do have bad days, and we all have darker sides, and you know, stories are escapes. They're distractions, but they're also tools. Like, you shouldn't ignore the lessons a story can teach you just because it happens to have a talking frog, or because a man in it played by Tobey Maguire can shoot webs. This is the last thing I have to say. The world is weird, man. Don't be afraid to be weird, because there's nothing wrong with being weird as long as it's being you. Don't be afraid to be who you are, because That's the best thing to be. I can't be you. Nobody can be you. Only you can do that. And Robert Downey Jr., because that man is an incredible actor.
I'm not going to disagree on that.
I mean, if it was like, all right, Robert Downey Jr., so today you're going to play Kneale Burris, overweight guy, very into nerdy stuff, gray hair. You can do this. The fans of my channel would know Josh Gad is the best choice to play me in a movie.
I can see that. I'd be down with that.
I am all about it.
And I gotta say this, Mr. Taylor the Fourth. It was great sitting down and talking once again with you. I think we had a good discussion together. I think we dug more about who you are in your full-on love on film, but also too about why you enjoy putting smiles on people's faces.
And I like that you called me Arthur Kneale Taylor during this, because that will never happen again, ever, even in real life.
And I will take that and live that and put that on my mantle.
Yeah, you get that card. You get the Arthur Kneale Taylor card.
And that's
like my word.
And that's the rarest card in my collection. My name is Ronald E. Smith. This was Arthur Kneale Taylor the Fourth. And let me just tell y'all something. We got real. Thank you. And have a good day. Be safe.